thank you very much. It's an honor to be here today, and greatly appreciate it. We don't get to speak in front of a hometown audience that often, so we really get excited when that opportunity does come up. So, David, thank you very much for that introduction. I guess I don't have to tell you who I am over again, but for either tweeting during the presentation or if you want responses to questions afterwards and so forth, just want to keep in touch. We're at Tailwind app as a company, and I'm at Daniel P. Maloney. So anything that you tweeted us, we promise we'll get back to you today. All right, so what is Tailwind? Why am I up here? I'd like to give you the really quick overview so you understand the perspective that we come from. We are a data-driven company, so data is at our core, and we wake up every day thinking about how we make marketing on Pinterest easier for everyone, and that means from individual bloggers and small businesses all the way up to Fortune 500 companies. How we do that is first we take in a whole lot of data. So in any given day, we're pulling observations from over 50 million users on Pinterest, over 21 billion pins or so. So it's a lot of data, and we're trying to distill that into the observations that help people make decisions for their marketing plan. So first and foremost, it's analytics. That's where most people know us. But increasingly, we're getting into other things like listening and running campaigns and influencer recruitment and so forth. So we're moving from here's the data, here's some interesting insight, to here's what you can do with it. So that's who we are as a company. Today, we have over 4,500, close to 5,000 brands now who are using our platform. Some are household names, some are smaller businesses that are on their way up. And about 300 advertising and communications agencies are using us around the world. And we're based right here. So that's one of the questions we get pretty often. Well, a company like yours actually exists in OKC, and in fact, there are many companies that are doing really cool things, building awesome technology, great startups in the OKC area, in Tulsa as well, and throughout the state. So part of my own selfish motivation here is to just drive acknowledgement of that community today and to have more people aware of the fact that great technology is being built right here in the state that you can use to help promote your own careers and your own businesses. So with that, would love to share the materials from today and keep the conversation going. Here's my number. If you text me your email address or email and first name, after the presentation, I'll get you the slides, as well as my own contact information, and I want to make myself and my team available. So if you're thinking about marketing on Pinterest and need to build your strategy, whether it's tomorrow, next week, or 6 months from now, would love to have you reach out, and we're happy to help you out just to help build the community. So feel free to do that. The number will be up in the top corner throughout the presentation. All right, that's enough introduction. What are we talking about today? First and foremost, 5 key things that you need to know about Pinterest, and this is really about framing the Pinterest opportunity. What is it? Why does it matter? How does it differ from other platforms? After that, how do you build a strong foundation? So, for some people, they've been on Pinterest for 1.5 years, 2 years at this point, and they understand that. They've gone through that phase already. What we find is, frankly, most companies are really just starting to turn their attention to Pinterest now, which is a good thing because it means there's still a lot of room to grow, and there's a lot of room to grow without having to pay for ads in order to do it. So that's what's making it really attractive. And then I'll save a little bit of time for some more advanced strategies that we see people using that are really paying off. All right, so what are the 5 key things? The first thing, Pinterest is fundamentally different from Facebook and Twitter. We often hear people group the 3 together and say, oh yeah, the 3 big social networks, Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest. They're used differently and consumers view them differently. So what do I mean by that? Well, each one has added sort of a new utility or a new layer to the web. Twitter is the real-time feed of what's happening right now. It's news that's going on, it's what you're doing, what's interesting to you, the conversation you just had, and so forth, right? For Facebook, it's all about identity. You've heard the term social graph, I'm sure, over and over again over the past few years. They're helping the web understand who knows whom, who you are, where you're from, where you live, those types of defining characteristics that make you you. When you talk about Pinterest, it's a completely different use case. Pinterest is an aspirational network. So when you think about some of the major use cases on Pinterest, right, it's shopping, gifting, planning weddings, what your new kitchen's going to look like, what your new house is going to look like, that car that you want to make and remodel, right? All of those types of use cases are aspirational in nature. And so when people pin, they're not necessarily telling you who they are or what they're doing, but more who they want to be and what they plan to do to get there. So that is incredibly interesting from a marketer's perspective because typically pins occur before purchase decisions, right? So, okay, I know I need to remodel our office, and we actually used Pinterest to remodel our office. We created a board called Our New Office and just started pinning stuff like crazy, the entire team. So we had all sorts of ideas, many of which we couldn't actually afford, but it was fun anyway. And if those companies were paying attention, they could have stepped in and stolen our business right there. Right? They could have said, oh, I see that you're pinning our products and you're remodeling your office. That desk chair that you loved, you're buying 12 of them, fine. We'll give you 20% off if you buy all 12, right? That would have gotten our business. Instead, we might have gone with a competitor. So that's an opportunity that exists on Pinterest, which very rarely exists on other networks. And in that way, Pinterest is sort of bridging the gap between social and discovery, which is kind of cool because discovery has been Google's world for years, right? And that's the most monetizable part of the internet. So Pinterest is in a pretty unique position there. On top of that, they were very intelligent in how they build the platform. So when I think about Twitter, I follow a lot of people, but unfortunately, I usually find that maybe 5 to 10% of the tweets coming through my stream are actually relevant to me. Maybe I'm over-following, but I think the bigger thing there is that when you follow someone on Twitter, you're following all of their tweets. On Pinterest, you don't have to do that. You can follow an entire user, or you can follow individual boards on topics that you're interested in. This is a fundamental difference that leads to the traffic on Pinterest being more targeted. Because as users mature on the platform and get to know it better, they start hitting these gray buttons a whole lot more and that red button a whole lot less. Right? They understand that they can curate their own feed and target it to their interests. So for business, what does this mean? Well, you can reach people with highly targeted content specifically about what they're interested in and specifically related to your business, right? That means you don't have to worry about, how do I mix up my pins over time so that my stream doesn't lean too heavily one way or the other? Because if someone's only following a given board, they're not going to see the other pins anyway. What does this all mean in turn? More traffic, more revenue, right? So I won't go into the details of this study, but essentially they monitored a significant amount of web traffic and found that per user on the platform, Pinterest is driving 12 to 14 times as much traffic as Facebook or Twitter, right? So substantially more per user. Granted, it's still a smaller network. They're probably around 70 million monthly uniques versus Facebook's billion users, right? But what this does indicate is that as Pinterest grows, it's going to become an increasingly meaningful player in terms of referral traffic. So they already command an outweighted share of referral traffic they send versus the audience who uses their platform. On top of that, because the audience is so targeted, when they come to sites, they're more likely to convert. And that could mean spending more if it's an e-commerce site. It could mean subscribing to newsletters more if it's a media-oriented site or a publication. But there's more traffic coming per user. That traffic is more valuable. When you think about this over the long term, it paints a pretty rosy picture. Looks like we have an animation issue here. But there's been some talk today about sort of the instantaneous nature of Twitter in particular. And that's right. Twitter's a real-time platform. So when you look at Twitter, generally a tweet lasts for about 5 to 25 minutes in terms of its ability to drive traffic. When you go to Facebook, that number jumps to about 80 minutes because of the newsfeed algorithm, which keeps recycling content for a longer period of time. On Pinterest, that period is multiple weeks long. So to give you a sense, one of our most popular blog posts right now has been uniquely pinned 758 times as of this morning. In the first 48 hours, it had something like 70 pins. And I think that post is probably about 3 months old now, right? So over the last 3 months, it has continued being pinned and repinned and spreading over and over again. And just last week, it drove like 500 or 600 visits to our site in a single day, right? So that's the type of thing that can happen on Pinterest. It means content is more evergreen, and it means that when you think about content strategy, you've got to focus on quality more and quantity less. Because every pin you pin is going to continue to represent your brand for weeks or months into the future. And the fifth major thing to know is that it's not just about images. So people think pins, images, Pinterest is popular because it's image-based. Pinterest has started very cleverly moving in the direction of gathering more rich data about the pins on the network. So this way they can understand them better, they can surface them to you better, and ultimately they can drive more and more valuable traffic to publishers, retailers, and so forth. So there's this concept of a rich pin that they introduced a few months back. Here's an example for a product, right? So you have the image of these pendant lights, but underneath, and maybe you can see it from where you're sitting, maybe not, but it says this item is in stock, it's $421, and it used to be $496. So you instantly know the pricing, you know that you can actually buy it if you click through, and you know that it's from a site called Room 68. And you can then click through, right? So this is increasing the visibility of the brand that's carrying this product or that maybe published a post. But on top of that, it's taking up more screen real estate, and it's helping Pinterest classify the product more intelligently. So if you search for pendant lights, guess what? Now they understand that this piece of content fits that search, right? This is going to enable them to drive increasingly targeted traffic over time. So if you're curious about how to get your own content, we've got a blog post, tailwindapp.com/make-rich-pins. And again, if you text me your email, I can include that in the email afterwards, so you've got the link. So they're doing really cool stuff with this data, just to give you the glimpse at it. I mentioned before, the product is $421, was $496. So as they're monitoring this information over time now, they're identifying when a price drops on an item. And if you've pinned that item before, they're going to send you an email notification and a notification on Pinterest telling you that that item is now less expensive than it used to be. So they've become a de facto clearance house, basically, right, for products and goods. And probably no one else on the web can do this right now. Maybe Amazon with their own inventory, but Pinterest is doing this across the web for other people's inventory. And really exciting, they just released media-rich pins. So just a few weeks ago, and you can see here examples from Time and The New Yorker and prominent publications, but anyone can participate. So our blog posts now get rich pins. So if this is our blog post, it's going to say Tailwind blog, it's going to have our logo, you've got the headline, and then you've got a snippet of the article itself. So when a user sees that, they know there's more content underneath. And if they click through, they're going to come to our blog and they're going to be able to read more. So it's not just an image anymore with a big question mark of what's behind it if you click off of Pinterest. All right, so now with that information, how do you begin building a strong foundation? It ultimately comes down to some pretty basic principles that apply to multiple channels, right? Who's the right audience for you? What's the right content for that audience? And how do you engage them in a way that they're going to accept? So first and foremost, knowing your audience, there are some really simple questions you can ask to get insight before you ever even build your first board, right? So there's a nice principle out there, which is your users are on this site whether you're there or not. So all you have to do is look at what they've been pinning from your site. Look at who they are. Look at what they're interested in. And before you pin your first pin, you can already know what audience is engaging with your content and target your content strategy at what they're interested in. So shameless plug, we do offer an analytics dashboard that can help you in this regard. You can go ahead, sign up for a free account today if you want to on our website. But I'll give you a quick sense of how to make this a lot easier. So, who's pinning from my site? You can go, and there is actually a free way to look that up on Pinterest by using what's called their source pages. However, you can only see the last 50 pins, right? And then you'd have to click into each person's profile. We give you a nice report that tells you exactly who they are, how many followers they have, how often they've been pinning from your site, and so forth. Want to see what they're pinning about? We'll show you the top trending images from your website. You could look up to the last 1,000 pins, so a much longer time frame. And you can also see a nice little handy word cloud to tell you what they're saying when they're pinning from your site, so you know which keywords, which terms are being associated with your content on Pinterest already, right? That's very powerful as you build out your boards, because here for this site, okay, I know portobello mushroom, very popular in terms of content from this site. Maybe I'm going to build an entire board of portobello mushroom recipes because I know my audience already enjoys that. Step two, it could be create, as we heard just in the last presentation, but really curate content that your audience is going to enjoy. So if you have pinner's block and don't really know where to start, we usually recommend doing 5 boards that are things your audience loves, and you can tell that by looking at what they're pinning. 5 boards about what they want to learn, so information that's not readily accessible about them. Here you're being a utility, right, to your users, and they're going to love you for that. And then maybe 2 boards about your brand and what you want to communicate. So we're intentionally skewing the content here towards your user and away from your marketing objectives. The reason for this, if you over-market out of the gate, people will ignore you, right? Your first task is to build audience. To do that, you have to gain their trust and admiration. So this is where we like to tell people to start if you're not really sure where to get going. A quick note there, as you build boards, cover photos are critical. This is an eye tracking study that a site called Mashable published. I won't go into the detail, but basically where there are splotches of color, that's where people are looking when they hit a profile page on Pinterest. So you can see that top row of cover photos is absolutely critical. If those are not engaging, people are going to bounce off of your profile and go back to other people's profiles or other parts of the site. And then, of course, you can use analytics, our platform or others, to see things like which boards are generating the most repins over time, which ones have content that's the most viral, and so forth. And that's going to enable you to adjust your content strategy as people react or don't react to what you're pinning. All right. Step 3, how do you engage them on their terms? Same concept again. If you market to people in a way they don't want to be marketed to, they're going to ignore you, right? You've got that irrelevant billboard, they're going to drive by and not pay attention. So you want to make sure you don't act in that way. So some simple ways that you can optimize this. First is find out when they're active. What days of the week, what times of day are your user base most active on Pinterest, and schedule your pins to be at that time of day and at that day of week. If they're online, they're able to see your pins, they're able to repin them, they're able to react. If they're asleep, no one's seeing your pin because by the time they've woken up, it's already off their feed. Another simple strategy is to see who is repinning your content and how they want to be engaged, right? So here, we've got a report where you can actually see for a given brand who's repinning their content most often, and you've got the little links to Facebook profiles, Twitter profiles, their own blogs or websites, right? This is information people have put publicly on their Pinterest profile because that's where they want to be contacted. So if a user likes being contacted on Twitter, there's no harm in going and building a relationship with them on Twitter, so when they see you on Pinterest, they're going to be more engaged and more prone to share your content. All right, so let's get into some of the advanced stuff now. Assuming you've got the basics right, what can you do to really ramp up growth? I'm going to run through 3 strategies that we've seen work incredibly well. The first, this is a case study in the automotive sector, and the data is a little bit dated now, but the principle still works. So Honda jumped out to an early lead. They did some really clever Pinterest marketing in the early days, some nice sweepstakes and things of that nature. But ultimately, they were just head and shoulders above the rest. And then this little orange line, which is Jeep, comes out of nowhere. They were, I think at the time, number 15 or 16 in the automotive category, and seemingly overnight they jump up to like number 5 or 6, right? So what did they do? It was actually something really simple. They built intelligent cross-promotion of their platforms. So in order to get that bump, what Jeep did was shared this photo of a really cool tricked-out Jeep, and if you're a Jeep lover, you're going to love this, right? They shared this on Facebook. And not only did they get the benefit of this going viral on Facebook because it's such a cool image to begin with, so 23,000 people liked this image in the first 48 hours, 3,400 people shared it, right? So it went viral on Facebook, drove a bunch of visibility on Facebook, but because in the text with the photo they put, check out our new Pinterest page at pinterest.com/Jeep, they gained over 1,000 followers overnight on their Pinterest profile. And I love this example because when people think Pinterest, they don't think Jeep, right? That's not the target audience. It's not the stereotype of who uses Pinterest. But what this has showed is the beginning of a longer-term trend where Pinterest is going more mainstream, frankly. More men are using Pinterest. People with more diverse interests are using Pinterest. Pinterest has even added a tattoos category on their main navigation because they saw so many people pinning tattoos, right? It's not exactly the stereotypical weddings, food and beverage, women's fashion, and so forth. So as the site grows, it's becoming a mainstream utility for the entire web, which is letting even brands like Jeep that appeal to a different audience leverage the platform. So 23,000 likes, as I mentioned, on Facebook. Their Pinterest followers jumped by over 1,000, seemingly overnight. And more importantly, their ongoing growth rate of new followers tripled from 35 a week to 110 a week. And that might not sound like a lot, but if you can keep multiplying that growth rate out over time, it ends up in 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, 2 years, that you have a substantially larger audience than you otherwise would. Why did this work? Because people were driven there by great content that they loved. They weren't bribed with a contest. They weren't, bought through an ad. Here it is, a great picture. People love it. They engage with you, and they continue engaging with you as a result. A couple more strategies really quickly. So if that strategy works, you might think, okay, well, I'll just focus all of my Pinterest marketing on cross-promoting with Twitter and Facebook. This was a real brand that came to us trying to figure out how to grow on Pinterest. And as we dug in with them, they started out saying, hey, we want to cross-promote Twitter and Pinterest. But what we found out was, first, they had a lot more fans on Facebook than Twitter followers, but they had 2.1 million email subscribers. And they weren't using that audience at all. So we asked them why, and they said, well, when we email our user base and say, we're on Pinterest, come follow us, we get a lot of negative responses. Right? People unsubscribe, they label us as spam, and we just don't know why that's happening, so we've stopped using email. Well, the reason it's happening is that we analyzed their audience and found that only 600,000 of their email subscribers were actually using Pinterest. The other 1.5 million were not, right? So we said, okay, what if you could target your email campaigns for Pinterest just to the 600,000 people who are active on Pinterest? And they said, okay, that sounds interesting. What do I do with the rest? Well, you break them out as well. So then we discovered that 800,000 of those other users were active on Facebook, and 300,000 were active on Twitter. So now this brand can produce highly targeted email campaigns that start with the concept of don't ask a Pinterest user to retweet something, and don't ask a Twitter user to like something, right? So you're speaking their language in terms of the platform, but then you can also grab your best content from each of those platforms and syndicate it to exactly the audience that is likely to help it go viral, right? Your Facebook audience isn't going to help your pins go viral, but your Pinterest audience will. So what happened with this? These are charts of their follower growth and repin growth during the short campaign. So this was an initial test campaign, actually only included about 60,000 of their huge email subscriber base. But what you see is the follower growth jumped in kind of a step function way. So each of those little bumps is a day where an email send went out, and that was pretty interesting. But on the other hand, repins grew a bit more exponentially over the course of the campaign. So what that means is that even though followers were being obtained with each send, because the content in the email marketing was well targeted, those followers were continuing to engage and repin even between emails, right? That's real growth. And as a result, after the campaign ended, in both cases, their follower and repin rates on a daily basis were about 2 to 3 times higher than when they started. So the audience remained engaged, and they kept growing faster over time. So what did that look like for them? So I mentioned about 60,000 users targeted. They spent under $2,000 on the campaign. And as a result, they grew their direct revenue from Pinterest by over $11,000 a month. They were getting an additional 12,000 pins from their website per month after the campaign ended. And they were gaining about 2,500 more followers per month than they had been previously. So huge ROI with a very small amount of investment. The key thing is using data to be intelligent and targeted about how you reach out to your audience. So I think I'm out of time, but I want to call out one last point, which is that the third strategy and the way that we see brands actually, or publishers, seeing the biggest gain is they don't just think about data on Pinterest as being about Pinterest and what happens on Pinterest. Right? So when we talk to retailers, one of the things I ask them is, do you know what your competitors' most popular products are? And usually they say, well, we might have an idea, but no, not really. Okay, great. Well, Pinterest can tell you that, right? If you track what's being pinned from your competitor's website, there's going to be a very high correlation. Now, what could you do with that information, right? So we built a way to track competitors really easily, and now they can get that information that they've never had before. So if that helps a company like, say, Target, a Goliath, improve their merchandising decisions by even 1%, the increase in same-store sales for them is $700 million per year, right? that is way more, frankly, than they're going to sell on Pinterest in a year or 2 years or 5 years probably, right? But that is a real meaningful result for their business. And that's by saying this Pinterest thing just isn't about Pinterest, and this Twitter thing isn't just about Twitter. The real question for us is, how do these channels overlap, and how can data from one channel be used to make other channels more intelligent? So that's what I've got for you today. Would love to keep in touch, would love to answer any questions. I think we've got a booth set up out back, so yeah, you can build some Pinterest crafts for your desk out there. I'll be out there happy to talk and answer questions either after this session or during the next break. But also I'm at Daniel P. Maloney, Danny@tailwindapp.com. And again, if you text me your name and email, I'll get you the presentation and maybe some other materials as well so we can keep in touch over time. So thanks a lot, y'all.
Get up.